So you're a year into the job, and we've talked about how you knew this was going to be a hard job.
Yes.
There were a lot of skeletons you knew you would find in the closet. And you've likened it to climbing Everest. So how far are you? Are you well on your way, or are you still at base
Well,
camp?
the beauty, the thing about climbing Everest, it's the journey. It's not the destination all the time. And so we're well on our way to getting to the top. But I have to say, the last year has been incredible for me, just to be able to be at a company that has got this organizing principle of do the right thing, which really informs everything we do. And then being able to make progress on some and take leadership positions on some of the issues like sexual assault prevention that we are beginning to do with this taxonomy that you just referenced.
You've not just pushed Uber to do the right thing, but to do the right thing, period. And
That's right.
This handling of sexual assault cases does go beyond what other companies do. How optimistic are you, though, that other companies will follow?
Well, I'm actually quite optimistic. We are having conversations with other companies about adopting this taxonomy, because what this is, it's never been done before, is it categorizes exactly what kinds of behaviors, or I should say misbehaviors, that make up sexual assault or sexual harassment or sexual misconduct. Not always illegal conduct, but conduct that you don't want happening in a customer service environment. And what's great about it, even though it was developed with the Uber platform in mind, it can be used by any company that pulls two or more people together in the real world in a customer service environment.
Now, the question is, I wonder, how do you balance your instincts as a former DOJ attorney when there are trends in the legal profession to enable companies rather than resist them? I mean, sexual assault, for example, it's believed that the incidents that are actually reported are highly underestimated, that there are far more than are actually reported. So is this really good for Uber's business?
Well, it's very good for Uber's business, but much more important than that, it is the right thing to do. It is good for all of us. We've always believed that if you enhance the safety of the platform for women, you'll make it safer for everyone. And what this effort does is it takes us closer to that goal of having a safer platform. I understand why some people might be reluctant. I mean, look, obviously the chief legal officer is usually the guy in the room who's saying, take less risk, not more. But the reason this makes sense for us is we have a paramount duty to our shareholders, no question, but we also have a duty to our stakeholders. Those are the millions of driver partners, riders who use the platform every day. We have to do right by them, and this is a step toward making the platform sustainable and safer in the long term.
Now, months before Google ended forced arbitration in sexual harassment cases, Uber did it. Uber's also done it for riders and drivers. Airbnb is taking that a step further and eliminating it for discrimination cases. Microsoft allows class action around sexual harassment. Why not go that far if there's an argument to be made that in getting these things out into the open more quickly, you address more systemic problems? Well,
I'm certainly proud of Uber's leadership position on this issue, and I have to applaud Airbnb and Facebook and Google for following suit here. And we think that the fact that the bar is being raised for everybody is a really good thing. I mean, it's a great thing, right, when you have companies competing with one another to raise the bar on an issue like this. When we took the step to announce the end of mandatory arbitration for individual claims of sexual assault, sexual harassment, we did so with safety primarily in mind, and that's really what drove that decision. I did say at the time, though, that this is a first step. It doesn't mean it is the only step, and so these are active conversations that we continue to have.
So you're considering the discrimination provision?
Definitely that is one of many things that we are actually considering. I should say that, there's nothing wrong with arbitration. Arbitration is an appropriate tool that is used by businesses every day in a very appropriate way. What we determined is that its use when it came to sexual assault and sexual harassment was inappropriate because it stripped agency and control from the survivor, even more, even continuing to do, unfortunately, what the original act can do in terms of stripping away that control. And so it's not really an appropriate tool there. You want to give the survivor choice. And I think as we look at whether or not arbitration is an appropriate tool for other types of claims, I think that's the kind of frame that we will approach it with.
Now, you now have an anonymous tip line for employees, and managing that has been challenging.
Yes.
Some of Your top executives, former HR head, your COO have been in the crosshairs. Another executive resigned over some of the allegations that came across this line. How do you balance corrective punishment and outright termination when people want to see consequences?
Well, certainly I can't speak, obviously, about any particular personnel decision, but I can say this. It's important when you have a system of reporting and a system of consequences in any workplace that there be a progression of responses that you can bring to bear, because what you're ultimately trying to do is make the workplace safe, inclusive, welcoming for the people to be there so that they can bring their best talents to work every single day. And you want to be able to support people in that environment. And if you can create that environment by giving someone coaching, or by changing someone's assignment so they're not in the same environment, or doing whatever and sometimes you may have to terminate someone. That's an appropriate response in some situations. I think the main thing is that you have to telegraph that you are going to take those actions. You are going to hold people accountable for their behavior, and that's going to be true across the board. I have said many times, no one is indispensable to a company. Everybody has to be held accountable for their behavior.
You've reached a settlement on the hack with all 50 states, and yet there are still multiple open questions from your former employer into Greyball, the foreign corrupt practices violations, data scraping, price discrimination, stealing trade secrets. Do you think that legal risks will factor significantly into Uber's IPO?
Well, certainly you always consider legal risks whenever you're looking at, whether you're going to go public or not. And I should say that I'm can't really talk much about whether or not we may go public. But I can say that, we just had a bond offering, and part of the risks that you put in a document like that include the legal risks that you face. I think one of the good things is that our legal risks are well known, as you've just recounted. So there's not a lot of secrecy there. The investors know, but I think investors also know that we've been methodical and successful in mitigating those legal risks. I think in less than 10 months, we've been able to not only announce a data breach, but then resolve it with all 50 states. I think that's got to be a record time from the time that you've announced a problem to the time that you've actually resolved it with 50 different regulators. And we're continuing to be very methodical about that.
So for some of these other legal concerns, can you say you've gotten the all clear from the DOJ?
I'm not in a position to say that. I'm still continuing to work hard to make sure we're responsive to the requests that we receive from all regulators. And we continue to work very methodically and carefully to make sure that we're mitigating risks across the company. I'm very confident, though, that there is nothing that certainly I'm aware of at this point that would be a hindrance, frankly, to the company going forward. We need to deal with these issues, no question. We need to put a lot of these issues behind us, but I don't see anything existential in terms of a threat to the company.
The SEC and the DOJ are now looking into Snap, according to Snap, for potentially not disclosing enough to investors about how much Instagram was harming their growth. Now, with your IPO, and your CEO has said, could happen, next year, and reports are that it could happen early next year. How do your priorities change as you prepare for public scrutiny, whenever it happens?
Well, look, I think the task for us is to recognize that even though we are a private company, we are a global brand. And that carries with it great responsibilities. It carries with it accountability. And frankly, if we begin to hold ourselves to the same standards that public companies hold themselves to, we'll find that we're towing that line just fine. I think the most important thing, too, is that, if the company goes public, when it goes public, I don't know. But what's most important is not the day it goes public. What's most important is the day after, and the day after that, and the months and the years after that. Execution is what's going to make this company continue to be a great company and a successful company, regardless of what any potential IPO date may or may not be.
Now, putting on your government hat experience,
yes.
I'm sure you're glad you're not Facebook today after this New York Times report. But now that you have experience in Silicon Valley, where do you think Democrats in the House should focus their energy when it comes to tech regulation?
I don't know. I'm probably not in a good position to give the House Democratic leadership advice. I'll let others do that. But what I will say is that it is important to always balance the approach as a regulator between creating incentives for good behavior and inviting companies to do the right thing and holding companies accountable. That's a very careful balance, and sometimes you can go a little bit too far in one way or the other. So the real balance is not to, I think, overcorrect, but to make sure that you're holding people appropriately accountable, no question, but that you're also recognizing and incentivizing companies to do the right thing.
Earlier this week, your CEO, Dara Khosrowshahi, said that you need more information to make a decision about how to proceed with your relationship with the Saudi Public Investment Fund. This morning, the Treasury Department sanctioned 17 Saudi officials. Do you have enough information now to make that decision?
I think I'm going to stand on Dara's previous answer, which is, look, let's be really clear and unequivocal. The murder of Mr. Khashoggi was a human rights and a civil liberties horrific tragedy that should never have happened. And I think you can't mince words about that. That should just never happen. And I think that the fact that we took it so seriously is manifest in the fact that Dara was one of the first executives to pull out of the Saudi conference when the initial reports we were getting was incomplete information and in some cases not credible information. I think there is a process in place to try to see if we can get more facts, more information, and I think once we get those facts, once we get that information, we're going to do our best to respond appropriately as a company.
Uber sales are dramatically slowing. Revenue growth in the third quarter was half of what it was 6 months ago, and also you're back to $1 billion in losses in a quarter. Are you plateauing here, or is this short term? I
actually saw the results yesterday, and I said, that's a healthy quarter for a company of our size and global scope. Look, the reality is that we are investing for future growth. When you look at what we're doing in freight, what we're doing in food, what we're doing with electric bikes and scooters, what we're doing in high potential markets like India and the Middle East, we are investing for future growth. We want to solidify our leadership position, both as a platform for mobility, but also in key markets. And I think that's what those results demonstrate.